I was talking with a client of ours, a coaching client, who had come to us for support in telling her own story. And I asked her, why are you doing this? What brought you here? What are you doing? And her response was both simple and kind of profound. She said, I'm here because my work moves at the speed of trust. Now, I have to tell you a little bit about this client. She's fabulous. We'll call her Stacy. She always shows up with these big funky earrings. She's got this lovely Texas lilt to her voice, and her commitment to Jewish community is unparalleled. And she works in partnerships for a small nonprofit. And so every conversation she has is about trust, is about ensuring that the person across from her really understands that both she and the organization are capable of delivering on what they promise, on doing what they say they're going to do. And when the opportunity came across her digital desk to do this storytelling coaching work, she jumped on it because she knew intrinsically that being able to tell her own leadership story more effectively, with clarity and confidence, would help deepen those relationships and help move those partnerships forward more quickly. And that's part of what we're here to do together today. We're going to talk about leadership storytelling, because storytelling is not a soft skill, it's not a nice to have, it is a critical leadership skill. Your stories, your leadership stories, are invitations and not presentations. And the role of being able to tell your leadership story well is not to show off, it's to show what's possible and to invite your audience in. And so this session is for wherever you are on your storytelling journey. I learned in the Moment yesterday that there are folks in this room who have been in the JCC system for over 30 years. Yeah? Amazing. I'm sure you're experienced storytellers. I'm sure you have your ideas in your pocket of how you share who you are and how you got here. And if that's you, fantastic. I know that our benchmarking evangelist also said that you've always been the storytelling movement. Yes, also do benchmarking. That's really important work. You've been the storytelling movement for a long time. So if that's you coming to this table, then I hope you'll use this session to sharpen the stories that you're already telling or to try something new. And I hope that you'll walk away with something that you can bring back to your team, to your professional staff, to your board, and help them extend this work of storytelling out to the next degree. I also know that there are folks in this room who are relatively new to the movement and to Mifgash. Y'all want to stand up? No, I'm just kidding. I'm not going to make you do that. If you are new to this role, to this work, to this movement, then hopefully this is your opportunity to give some shape to what brought you here and what motivates you in doing this work. This session is also for whatever story you feel you need to tell in this moment, right? These movement moments are characterized by what's happening across the JCC system, by all of that fascinating deep dive data that we got from Mimi yesterday about anti-Semitism in Israel and WhatsApp groups and all kinds of cool stuff and all of these moving pieces across our varied communities. But if that movement level story is not what's necessarily in your heart or sitting in your mind at this moment, that's okay. If you've got a big funder conversation coming up, if you need to motivate your staff in some way, if you're taking over an institution after the previous person left after that 30-year stint, whatever story is sitting in your heart and on your mind, feel free to bring that to this session and use this moment to dive into that work. Cool? Because storytelling is uniquely effective for exactly these moments. When we're in times of change and challenge and opportunity, it's important for us to have those stories in our pockets to be able to address those moments and move forward with clarity and with confidence. And I will totally own the irony of just sharing some random facts and figures about storytelling, but you'll forgive me that little bit here. Because storytelling is, especially leadership storytelling, is uniquely suited to making us more memorable, to making us more trustworthy, and to making us more influential. Now let's start with memorability. Imagine this scenario. There's a professor standing up at a class, and they're sharing a number of statistics about a particular topic. It's going at a mile a minute. There's a lot of information being shared. 10 minutes later, those students are interviewed about what they remember about that specific class. Anyone care to guess what percentage of those students in this particular study remembered even one factor figure? Any guesses?
5%.
5%. It was 5%. Remembered even one statistic from that session. The counterpoint, that's very well done. The counterpoint is 63% of them remembered the stories, a factor of 12 to 1. And other studies, especially those done by Jennifer Acker at Stanford University, she works in the marketing world, have demonstrated that storytelling is actually something like 20 to 22 times stickier, more memorable than any kind of standalone fact. If we want to be memorable in these moments, we have to be telling stories. Okay, so that's being memorable. Trustworthy. Something kind of magical happens when our bodies and brains are given the cues that we're being told a story. When we get those moments of once upon a time, and then this happened, and the beast emerged, and they lived happily ever after. When we get those cues, our bodies are programmed to release oxytocin. They're programmed to release the hormone that is associated with empathy and trust. We are literally biologically wired to trust people who tell us a story, which is an enormous responsibility and also a huge opportunity, right? If we want to be trustworthy, we need to be telling stories. And finally, we're memorable, we're trustworthy, now we want to be influential. We want to make sure that the actions that we're giving people to do out in the world, they're actually going to take them and run with it. And so for that, I turned to a study by a pair of researchers, Braddock and Dillard, who did a meta-analysis of over 70 research studies about the power of narrative to move people in certain ways aligned with the message of the story. They looked at 70+ research cases and found that across the board, absolutely, stories move people to action in line with the messages of those particular narratives. Nonfiction stories in particular. The verdict's a little bit out when it comes to fiction, but if we tell someone a real and true story, they will be more likely to be moved to action than any other kind of information. So we're here because we are ready to take on that storytelling mantle, to refine it, and to be more memorable, trustworthy, and influential in these moments. Now, I would be remiss if in a storytelling session that I didn't give a really powerful example of leadership storytelling in action. And for that, I'm going to introduce a one Miss Alex Borstein. Is anyone familiar with Alex Borstein? Yeah, fantastic, marvelous Mrs. Maisel, Family Guy, Mad TV back in the day. Somebody has her daughter in camp. Fantastic. So regardless of whether you actually know Alex Borstein or not, we're all a couple degrees away from her. A few years ago, Alex Borstein won an Emmy for her work on The Marvelous Mrs. Maisel. And her Emmy acceptance speech is second to none. It is a masterclass in leadership storytelling and in condensing a very clear narrative in a beautiful way with a powerful call to action. So what I'd love for us to do is we're going to watch just the 2 minutes or so of her going from her seat. She will also comment on the heat. And there's a little bit of, if you know Alex Borstein, her comedic style at the beginning is a touch raunchy, so we're just going to roll with it. But she's going to go from hearing that she's won the award to accepting and giving this powerful speech, and then we'll talk about what we heard. Yeah? Feel free to use your worksheets as fans. We're in this together, people. We got this. Authentic, absolutely, right? We can tell this is coming from her. I want to add to that also practiced, right? It feels real. It's definitely in her DNA, right? And at the same time, she's clearly worked on this. She's run it over and over and over to get it into that tight space while she has the moment on stage before they play her off. What else? Passion. Passion. Yeah, you can hear it in her voice, right? This is her story. This is her moment. Amazing. I saw, yes?
She introduced the characters of her story.
Yeah. She introduced the characters of her story. I think there's a couple levels of that too, right? When does that start, do you think? Does it start here?
She would go drink with her husband.
With a drink, yes, with a drink next to Seth MacFarlane, right? She introduces the characters in the story, I think, when she says that she wants to dedicate her award to all the women of the Maisel crew, right? She's clearly focusing her audience there and naming that not only is this story about these people in my family, it's about you, ladies, who I'm going to ask to step out of line. Great. What else? Anything else we noticed? Yeah.
Well, the mic doesn't work.
Oh.
I think she took us through every possible emotion in a very short period.
Ooh. Did she ever? She took us through every possible emotion in the space of, I think that clip's maybe 1 minute and 40 seconds, something like that. She makes us laugh, she makes us cry. Wayne's World fans, she makes us hurl, right? So she's taking us through a whole bunch of emotions in a very short period of time. Anything else? Yeah.
Talks about the past, the present, and the future.
Ooh, nice, exactly. This is a story about her that she's calling up into the past, that she's naming in this moment, and then extending the invitation out into the future. Beautiful. This is so good. Anything else? Yeah.
She named the moment. She said Holocaust. She didn't just say my grandmother years ago.
Yes, excellent. So she used the terminology, she named Holocaust, she made it very specific and clear what she was talking about. Excellent. Last thought, yes? There was a theme that tied it all together. What would you suggest is that theme? Empowerment, right? Taking charge, stepping up. Fantastic. Okay, awesome. Regardless of whether Alex Borstein knew it or not, part of the reason that this is such a powerful and fun and compelling and memorable example of leadership storytelling is because it follows, to a certain extent, a framework that we're going to introduce today and dig into ourselves. And that framework is called public narrative. Has anybody done some public narrative work before? Yeah, fantastic. All right, amazing. So happy to introduce this as something new to the most of the room. Public narrative is a framework for leadership storytelling. It's a framework for telling your story in a way that organizes and mobilizes and galvanizes people to your cause. And it was developed by a fellow named Dr. Marshall Gans, who was a social change leader in the 60s. He marched with Dr. King. He studied the work of social change leaders of all stripes. And he now teaches at Harvard University, teaching leadership and strategy and narrative and exactly this framework that we're going to be learning today. Public narrative is made up of 3 stories, 3 essential components that all come together that turn into an invitation out to a broader community to join into something bigger than themselves. Those 3 components are the story of self, the story of us, and the story of now. The story of self is all about you. It's all about you and your call to leadership. What brought you to this moment? What drives you? What's your why? And what makes you effective to lead? The story of us takes the components of the story of self and broadens it out to the level of the entire community. It's a bit of a misnomer. It's not any one story. It's actually a collection of stories that are representative of that bigger us. Through the story of us, we learn what are the values and experiences that tie us all together, that make us an us, and that make us effective in this particular moment. Finally, the story of now is taking those elements of narrative and throwing them into the future, right? Naming the path forward, saying the urgency of the call, the meaning of this moment, our way forward, and how we're going to win. And these 3 elements don't need to be told in any particular order. You can take components of them and use them in different ways to meet the need. But all together, they make up this framework of public narrative that Dr. Marshall Gans recognized was the framework being used across social change leaders in the environments that he was in. The folks who were most effective at moving their communities forward were telling their stories in this way and inviting people in. It turns out Marshall Gans is also Jewish and was also inspired by this particular piece of wisdom that may be familiar to some in the room. This wisdom from Rabbi Hillel, Pirkei Avot, which is basically the Talmud's greatest hits of life advice. And it says, if I am not for myself, who will be for me? That, in its essence, is the story of self. If I am only for myself, what am I? This isn't just about me. This is the story of us. And if not now, when? The story of now. So this framework of public narrative is not just based on the work of the most effective social change leaders across history. It's also deeply Jewish. And I think that's kind of cool. So let's take a moment and look at the story of self, which is going to be the foundation for all these three stories, because it contains within it these three elements that make up both of the other stories as well. So again, the story of self is about you and your call to leadership, what brought you to this moment, why you're sitting here schwitzing in this, in this ballroom tonight, right? To learn together with your fellow JCC and JCC camp colleagues. What brought you here and why are you fit to lead? And there are three elements, again, to the story of self: a challenge, a choice, and an outcome. And we need all three. We're going to go back to freshman English for a moment. We need all three to have a strong story to put in front of people. We need the challenge, because what is a story without an obstacle, right? Not the most exciting thing. And also, when we open our own stories with a little bit of a challenge, we get that good Brené Brown vulnerability moment, right? We kind of one down ourselves in the moment to demonstrate that, yeah, we're human. We face stuff. We run into obstacles. We make mistakes. And in that moment, we then make a choice. We decide what to do. And this is the part I actually hear the least of when I hear professionals in the Jewish world tell their own stories. There's a couple of categories of storytelling when it comes to people sharing their own background that I hear over and over. One is the obligatory recitation of the LinkedIn, right? I went to this school, I was at these nonprofits, I did this work, I was in tech for a while, I bounced back, and now I'm here at the JCC, right? You kind of run down your life as if it were an itinerary. On the other side of the other side of the coin, I often hear people say, like, I've just always done this, right? Wasn't really anything on purpose. I've always been part of this, it's always been in me, and here I am today. And those are great, and they're valid, and in certain situations they work really well. But when we lose the choice, we're losing a couple of things. We're losing our own sense of agency, regardless of whether you feel like you fell into this work accidentally or because somebody told you about this job. Regardless of whether you feel like you chose it or not, at some point you did make a choice. You acted on your own agency. And when we tell stories in which we demonstrate that we are making choices, then we're also showing to the person across from us, they too have agency. I made the choice, you can make a choice. And those choices come from values. Making that choice is acting on a particular value. And so when we leave out the choice, we're leaving out the opportunity to say, I carry this value, you carry this value. I made this choice based on this value, you can do the same. So the choice is a really critical piece of the equation. And finally, outcome, right? An outcome isn't necessarily about, and now everything's sunshine and roses and everything's great. But here I am today, in this work with you, in this moment, right? Ready to take on the world because of that choice. Okay, fantastic. And so if we look back at the text of Alex Borstein's Emmy acceptance speech, it follows that system to a T in a really tight, compact, emotional, beautiful way. There is a very clear challenge here. God forbid anyone face this. But there's a very clear challenge. There's an opportunity to make a choice. Her grandmother did not have to ask that guard anything. Her grandmother did not have to step out of line. She made both of those choices. And this outcome, it gets me every time. For that, I am here and my children are here, right? This is what literally, physically, genetically got me to this moment. And then finally, she closes with this beautiful call to action that echoes her grandmother's choice, step out of line. challenge, choice, outcome. Okay. So, let's take a moment. I'd love for you to practice this in a small group. Now, I know, again, some of us have been telling our leadership stories for a long time. If that's you, take this as an opportunity to sharpen, to hone, to condense, or try something new. Pick a different moment from your past that's emblematic of the values and the experiences that you bring into this room today. And if you're new, give it a shot. Share your story in terms of beginning with a challenge, a choice, and an outcome. All right? So I'm going to ask you have worksheets in front of you that have this laid out. It's the very first page. Break up into a group of 2 or 3. Think for a minute about how you might want to tell your story, and then tell your stories to one another. And then we'll come back together. All right, friends, thank you. Thank you for giving this a shot. I would love to hear from a couple people, just either reflections on how this went, how it felt, what, if anything, was different from how you typically tell your story. And if there's 1 or 2 people who can do an Alex Borstein short version of your story and want to be bold, I would be very welcome. That would be very welcome. Anyone care to share some reflections or share a mini version of their challenge, choice, outcome story? Your story of self.
So the challenge came when I realized in college I was a drama major, and I no longer wanted to professionally pursue acting. So I made a list of things that I loved about the theater. It educated me, it empowered me, it inspired me. And when I looked at the list, it reminded me of all the stories my grandma would share with me when I was a really little girl about why it was so important to be Jewish and have pride in my Jewish identity, even though her stories were about pogroms, the Holocaust, and the founding of Israel. But I felt it like all over me, like I have to go work for the Jews. And so now it's 30 years later. I've helped raise $300 million for Jewish organizations, and have built a career on authenticity, partnership, and trust, and a sincere hope that I've built stronger communities, stronger philanthropists, and stronger staff.
Woo! Yeah! Thank you, Janelle. Beautiful. Thank you. No surprise there. Oh, we've got another one over here. Fantastic.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
So I didn't write mine, but I'll try to go through it. And so in 2008, I was pregnant with my son, and I'm Jewish by choice. And I had this overwhelming fear that I wouldn't be able to raise a Jewish child, although I had converted, gone through all of everything. I just didn't feel connected to community. And so my rabbi said, you need to start volunteering, and you need to see the ritual director. So fast forward, I'm volunteering everywhere you can possibly volunteer in the Jewish community. I'm on the board, I'm Interfaith Hospitality Network, running Mitzvah Day, and meeting with the ritual director. And so that was sort of the challenge and my choice. The outcome of that was becoming incredibly connected to my Jewish community. I had this amazing big family, but I didn't have those connections that you just feel in this community. And through that, I really had it. And as I was progressively volunteering more and more, and my kids were getting older, and it was time to start thinking about going back to work, I dipped my toe into part-time Jewish communal work, which 11 years later has turned into this amazing career. So
Beautiful. Thank you. Ah, gorgeous. I love that. What a powerful story of choosing and finding family. Gorgeous, amazing. Other reflections or other examples of stories that came out of this exercise? Thank you, Mark.
I'll ask if you can see me and tell me to stand up, but I am standing.
Good.
So it's the first challenge, gravitationally challenged. So this story actually starts at the Mecca of storytelling, at the happiest place on earth.
Disney.
I was working at Disney, and I don't even know how many years I was going on, and it was a time when I wasn't thrilled being there anymore, despite the happiest place on earth moniker, and my 6-year-old son came along and had this great idea that he wanted to help raise money to cure his best friend's rare Jewish genetic disease. And it gave me something to do that gave me inspiration and lifted me out of the morass of Walt Disney Company, with all due respect to the gods of Disney. And I went on this journey with my son and my family that changed my life, and he ended up raising close to $2 million towards this cure for this rare disease. A 6-year-old Pisher inspired me to go into nonprofit, in which case I did, and got an amazing job at an organization founded by Jewish moms, no less, because who else could be as audacious to start an organization to help train autistic young adults for careers in the media and entertainment space. And again, I had another epiphany and decided at some point to go to Israel on a men's trip, and came home and thought that what better way to serve my people and still remain an impact than to go into Jewish service. I put that out to the universe, not expecting it to answer, and when it did, I rejected it, and my wife, the brains of the operation, said, David, the JCC just called. You just said something out into the universe. You need to heed the call. And so between the brains of my wife and the inspiration of a naive child who did something magical, I am now here in the greatest experience and job of my career ever in probably my whole life. Being in this space is truly transformational, and I intend to do great things here, and I intend to stay, so I hope you'll keep me. So that's the story.
Woo! I love it. I love opening with humor. I love listening to your wife. This is fantastic. It's a great story. I saw one more hand. Yeah.
So I grew up without a lot. My mom was a teacher. My dad was not employed. And I would often go to my mom and say, it's not fair, it's not fair. And her response was always, well, Brooke, there are people who were just born on third base. And so from then on, I made the decision that I wanted to dedicate my life to people who maybe never even got to be in the dugout. And so did that throughout my entire career, specifically with folks with developmental disabilities, and then entered the Jewish community and learned about Jewish values and thought, oh my goodness, the Jewish Community Center just opens the door for these individuals who maybe never were in the dugout. So I'm thankful to be part of it.
Beautiful. Thank you. Thank you. Amazing. Could literally spend the rest of the afternoon hanging out hearing your stories, but I feel a cool breeze and it's inspiring me to keep going. I love that. I love the connection of the values and action. I love that so many of these stories had to do with family and belonging and connection. It's so beautiful. As you continue to tell and refine these stories, thinking about how they then make that leap, make that step into the work that you currently do at your JCC, at your camp, is a really, really powerful connection to be able to make, matching those values and those choices and those experience across the full arc of that story. Gorgeous. Okay, we're going to move into the next circle of public narrative. We're going to talk about the story of us, which I mentioned before is not really, it's a bit of a misnomer. It's not a single story, but it's an opportunity to use that framework of challenge, choice, outcome to tell individual stories that are emblematic of the greater community that you serve and that you seek to serve. So I think about the story of us. The best example that comes to mind for this, not always my favorite example, but the best example that comes to mind for this is when we are watching the State of the Union. And the president, whoever he inevitably may be, is behind the podium and giving his State of the Union address. And at some point, looks up into the balcony and says, meet this person. Let me tell you about them and their story. This is the challenge they faced. This is what they did in the face of that challenge. And this is where they are today. That is an American story. And he goes on for a while, and then he points to someone else and says, meet this other person. This is who they are, what they faced, and where they are today. That is an American story. And by way of setting those examples, it's emphasizing, who is this us? Who is this for? Who do we belong to? And each of those individual stories becomes an invitation for other people to find a little bit of themselves in those stories. It's a manifestation of this piece of advice from this obnoxiously prolific marketing guru, Seth Godin. Anybody follow Seth Godin? Okay, bald head, cool glasses, writes all the time. Anyway, he summarizes marketing using the following phrase: people like us do things like this. That's the whole job of your marketing. That's a whole job of your storytelling. It is to demonstrate that if you're a people like us, You should be doing things like this. And if you do things like this, you in fact are a people like us. It's about setting the boundaries of that community and the invitation to come in and act together. And when you tell the story of us, when you give these emblematic examples of the values and experiences that hold this community together, you're doing a couple of things. After moving from that story of self, where you are the hero, you are the protagonist, you're moving from that role into that of the mentor. You're going from Luke Skywalker to Yoda. You're going from Dorothy to Glinda. You're going from Batman to Alfred, because who in their leadership time has not felt like a butler in a cave once in a while, right? You're shifting roles. You're the person who's gained this experience, who's learned this wisdom, and now your job is to support and empower the heroes around you to go on their own journey. And you're also demonstrating, in the context of these stories of us, where we do have a human protagonist, that the JCC is also not the hero of the story, and not the mentor necessarily, but not Dorothy and not Glinda, but the Yellow Brick Road, or the Bat Cave, depending on your JCC, right? Depending on your camp. The JCC becomes the platform, becomes the epic scenery where all of this is made possible, where all of this plays out. And this is my family's JCC story. My youngest child went to the early childhood at the Chicago JCC. We've been members. They've gone to camp there. And with the early childhood piece in particular, my husband, who was stay-at-home dad for a long time, was the one responsible for bringing our kiddo. And there was a little room where all the parents would gather before, right, as they were getting ready to drop off their children. And that became that space for connection and conversation. And he developed relationships with other parents that he never would have had. And so later on, when pandemic hit again, he started telling those other parents about the challenges that we were having with our older child, who had some pretty severe mental health issues following the pandemic setting in. And because of those conversations, he felt a sense of support. And we got the help that we needed so that my kiddo can thrive today. And that would not have happened had the JCC not been that bat cave, that yellow brick road, that platform for us to build those relationships and make those connections. And I want to say one other thing about telling other people's stories, about telling the story of us. Because again, we have this huge, holy responsibility, this opportunity when we're telling other people's stories. And that is to ensure from the beginning that the person that we're talking about is a peer, is an equal, is someone on the same footing as us. So while we, in telling our own stories of self, may begin with challenge and kind of one down ourselves, show a little bit of vulnerability, when we tell other people's stories, we want to make sure to begin with a relatable strength. And I'll give you an example. I was doing a workshop like this for a group of Israeli teens, Diller Fellows, who, if you're familiar with the program, who had come from Israel to Chicago, God knows why, but they were there in the cold, exploring and learning with all of these different leaders. And they'd come together to do some storytelling work with me. And there was one young woman who was clearly very intelligent, clearly very beloved by her peers, who started telling her own story of what brought her to this moment. And what she shared was, on October 7th, I woke up in Tel Aviv, and I saw the news, and I felt the anxiety, and I heard sirens, and I learned that my friend had been murdered. And she went to bed, and she stayed there for weeks, unable to move in the face of this tragedy and this grief that weighed upon her. At some point, she started hearing the voice of her friend in her head, saying, "What are you doing? You've got to get up. You've got to get up." And eventually, she decided to listen to that voice. And she got up out of bed, and she marched herself down to Magen David Adom, the office of the National Ambulance Service of Israel, and she started volunteering. And she started offering healing to the people in her community and service to her country in honor of her lost friend. Now, what kind of feedback do you give to someone who tells that kind of story? It's enormously powerful. It's emotional. It is her story. My only suggestion to her was what happens when you start on October 6th. Because when she started her story on October 7th, I felt a wall come up. I felt a sense of just defensive. I don't want to go through that. I've never been through anything like that. I can't relate to this moment. I don't have any interest in relating to that moment. But when she starts on October 6th, and she talks about the day before, I was on the beach in Tel Aviv, and my friends and I were getting ice cream and sodas and hanging out. And then October 7th hit. What shifts? Suddenly I can identify with her. Suddenly I get it. I know what it is to be a teen and just want to hang out on the beach eating ice cream. When we tell other people's stories and when we tell particularly difficult challenges, it's really important to start with that moment of human relatability to ensure, to remind ourselves, if we want to call on Jewish wisdom for this, we are all created in the image of God equally. And we need to be cautious and thoughtful and conscientious about how we represent that in the stories that we tell. Begin with strength and relatability. Don't introduce people based on their challenges. Cool? Okay, fantastic. I would love for you to take a couple moments just quietly to yourself. We're not going to do the conversational part. I want to condense this a little bit. Take a few moments to yourself and think about what are the stories of us, what are the stories of the members of your community that you already have in your pocket? What are the ones that you have ready to go at a moment's notice? Regardless of whether you're talking to a donor or your board or your staff or giving someone a tour of the camp or whatever it might be, what are the stories that you have at the ready? And then conversely, what are the stories that you don't yet know, but that would be useful in presenting to the world as potential entry points, as points of connection for folks to see themselves in the work that you do and in the community that you're trying to build? Okay? Second page of your packet, just take a minute or two and think a little bit about the stories you have on hand and the stories you might need to gather. Reflect on this, go back to it, think about the stories you need to gather and when you might be able to deploy them. Our last bit on public narrative is the story of now. I'm going to do this very quickly and then shift gears for a moment. Story of now is about the urgency of this moment, the opportunity. It's taking challenge, choice, outcome and blasting it out into the future. What is the challenge, the obstacle, the opportunity we have in front of us? What's the choice that we collectively, me and my story of self and my call to lead, you and your stories of us and who this community represents? What are we going to do now in the future? This is the call to action. This is the invitation. How can people get involved? Okay? And that's what ties those three circles that look a lot like the MJCCA logo together into a cohesive whole that invites people into your mission and your community. Okay, we have one last section. We're going to make a little bit of a shift. It's not a total like Monty Python and now for something completely different, but it is a little bit of a shift from storytelling to messaging. And the core of this is messaging is all about developing those short, repeatable, memorable messages that you want other folks to remember and repeat out in the world, right? Messages are about the body of your work, the physical kind of body of your work, whereas stories are more like the fashion that they go out in. So you can dress up your message in a Chapel Roan red carpet look, or you can dress up your messages in a Adam Sandler on a Tuesday afternoon look, whatever it might be. The message remains the same. The packaging looks different depending on the audience. And messages become memorable only through repetition. Messages become memorable only through repetition. Messages become memorable only through repetition. Amazing. So I'm going to introduce a slightly different framework that has some relationship to the public narrative and to this idea of challenge, choice, outcome. And it's called the messaging triangle, and this is typically used in media training and public relations. And it's a tool to help keep you focused on the one thing you want folks to take away, to remember, and to repeat. If anybody's ever been in the situation where, for instance, you talk to a reporter and you're answering all their questions, and you're going through the motions, and then you see the article come out, and you're like, are you serious? Why did they choose that quote? I said so many other great things. I said all this stuff. Has anybody had this experience? 100%. So the way to, there's media training you can do, by the way, in order to fix that moment. But the way that you fix that is by determining in advance, what is the one thing I want them to walk away with? The core message is the moral of the story. The core message is the one thing that everyone walks away with. And surrounding this core message are the problem, which is akin to the challenge. What is the problem the JCC or the camp was built to address? Or what is the problem you're pivoting towards now? What is the solution? This is a bit like the choice, right? What is the answer in the face of that problem? And then the result is the outcome, right? What's possible now? And they're all interrelated. They should use similar language, but it always comes back to what is that core, simple, repeatable, memorable piece of messaging that you want folks to take out into the world? And to give an example of that, I'm going to call up Paul from San Francisco. Hey, Paul. Amazing. Thank you for being open to helping us out. Do you have a mic? Yes.
Okay.
Here you are, my dear.
Hey, everybody.
Okay. Fantastic.
Okay.
Hey, Paul. How you
Hi.
doing?
I'm doing great.
Okay,
Thanks.
fantastic. So you had, in leading up to this program, you had shared some of this messaging that you developed for your JCC. Can you share a little bit of the background to where this came from?
So the background, you can hear me okay? Okay, so the background is, I feel like my job, the most important thing is to be the chief storyteller of the organization. And although there's some core messages that we always want to keep, I also am always pivoting it and changing it based on who the audience is, what the moment is, et cetera. So when I first got to the JCC, it was the middle of the pandemic. It was all about COVID and survival, and you can't let this organization fail. After October, then it was stories to change our reputation. We frankly had a bad reputation in town as not playing well with other Jewish organizations. And so we pivoted to this model of generosity, and that was our story for quite a long time. Then it was October 7th, and the aftermath, the war, the rise of anti-Semitism, and different people have been trying to push us to be things we're not. And so I keep going back to what are we good at? And recently, we're now at a point where, even though we call it the new building, it's 22 years old, and it needs $22 million worth of repairs and upgrades. And I went to a donor, and I started talking about all these upgrades and repairs that were needed. And he interrupted me, and he just said, tell me what you can do that nobody else can do. And I froze. I was not prepared for that. But I thought of something that had just happened at the JCC, and I told him the story about, this was not part of our original thing here.
Hey, do your thing, man.
I told him the story about Miriam and Ronaldo. And Miriam is a 97-year-old Holocaust survivor. Ronaldo is a 42-year-old former professional football player. And they were both in a rehabilitative swim class together. He, because of damage from playing football. And they met, and she swam up to him and said, I like your smile. And he said, I like your smile too. And the two of them have become best buds. And he picks her up from the assisted living center, drives her to the JCC, they do swimming, and they eat pancakes together. And she, 3 times a week. And he has brought her to the Booker T. Washington Community Center down the street. It's mainly serving the African American community. She's spoken there. So that story, to me, talks about the things that we do different, that we do that no one else can do. And also, I will say there's been a pivot lately about safety and a Jewish affirming space. So after the murders in DC, after Boulder, Colorado, in San Francisco, we've had our Hillel set on fire. We've had Jewish businesses, windows smashed out, etc. There is a sense of where can I go that is still a safe and Jewish affirming space. I know it's a weird slogan or phrase, but our kids are on social media, we're on social media, everything you see, everything you read, it's depressing, it's and it causes a sense of despair. And so we want the place to be, the JCC to be a place where you can go and feel joy and pride, and you don't have to apologize. And yes, we have people who have different views and different viewpoints and things like that, but when you come in here, this is your space. But we are also not a fortress. We are not, yes, we increased security, we did all of those things, but we are not a fortress. We welcome people. Everyone is welcome to the JCC. And by doing so, this used to be a negative for us. The donors would say, oh, you've got 65% of your fitness program is not Jewish people. What are you doing to prove that you're reaching this, and this mark? And now to say to them, 4,000 people a day are coming into our center, and over 2,000 of them are not Jewish, and they're walking out with a sense of friendship, connection, understanding. That is doing more than the billboards that are being put up all around. So
Awesome.
So that's a long version, but this is really what we came to. And so I shared it with Miriam, and then Miriam took it, and you want to say what you did to it?
Sure. So my team looked at this, and without a whole lot of that context or background, took that core language that you saw on the previous slide and mapped it onto a messaging triangle. We took a crack at what this might look like out in the world as just an example of this in practice. And so one thing that stood out to me for this was we wanted to hone in on what the problem was. In hearing Paul talk through the context of what's happening in the community, I think we could sharpen this language, right? We could be really clear about what the problem is that we're pivoting towards right now and how we address it. The other piece is that we wanted to be inclusive of both sides of this equation, that it's about positioning the JCC as a space for connection between and among the Jewish community and with our non-Jewish neighbors and friends and folks in the broader world. And so we came to this core message that really focuses on both of those things. You can see how some of the language from the problem and the solution and the result kind of weave into that core message. But honestly, this is just one perspective and one example of how this could play out. And Paul, you want to share a little bit about just what is the core message again that you all walked away with and has been resonating with the audience that you're speaking to?
Okay, so truthfully, Miriam sent me back an email and said, what do you think of this? And my initial reaction was, no, it's not that at all. and I felt uncomfortable, and at first I was going to write back, and then I was like, no, be more open-minded, and like look at what she's saying, and she's an expert, and I challenged myself to sit with it, and I actually practice it with my wife at the dinner table, and she was like, oh, that's pretty good. So I think some of the things that I pulled out of your reframing, there was a phrase that you said, like, we're the truly inclusive space. And so it's inclusive for Jews of every political persuasion, of every age, but also it's open to the broader community, et cetera. I liked that idea of where everything is so polarized right now, this is a truly inclusive space. So that was something that resonated.
Thank you. And ultimately, it sounds like this language of having a safe, Jewishly affirming space, and there was another section to it as well, right? Seems to be resonating especially with your donors in this moment, right?
Yeah.
Great.
So to the point where, again, I originally went with a list of $22 million of problems to a donor. The HVAC costs this costs that, the roof costs that. And he asked me the question, what do you do that no one else can do? And I told him about Miriam and Ronaldo. And he said, I'm taking care of all the capital needs. One check. Stop worrying about that. That's not the crap you should be thinking about.
Beautiful.
I want you to focus on the thing that you can do that no one else can do. So,
Gorgeous.
Great, thanks.
Thank you, Paul. Appreciate it. Amazing. Yes, big round of applause. Okay. Let's take a few minutes on this. I realize we're running over time. Thank you for bearing with me. Let's take a few minutes on this. I would love for you just to take a few minutes and think about what is the core message that you want folks to walk away with. Based on the stories you've told, based on the stories you've heard, what is the moral of the story? What is the short, memorable, repeatable thing that you want folks to walk away with and share with the broader community? So just 3 minutes, sit with it, and then we'll come back together. All right, fantastic. I'm happy to hear a story. I know you've got a good one.
Actually, I was going to tell a different one than I told you this
Oh,
morning.
amazing.
So the day before I started my job in Worcester, I just moved there the day before, and I was trying to find the grocery store, and I was driving with my phone in my hand and trying to find the grocery store, and I got pulled over. And for those of you who live in Massachusetts, you'll know that there's a law that you can't drive with your phone in your hand, but I didn't know that. And so I rolled down my window, and he says, "Do you know why I pulled you over?" And I said, I don't. I'm so sorry. I just moved here yesterday. I'm trying to find the grocery store. My new job starts tomorrow. I'm a little frazzled. And he says, well, there's this rule. He explains, and then he says, "Where's your new job?" And I said, "The Jewish Community Center." And as soon as I said it, I went, maybe I shouldn't have said that. He could be like anti-Semitic, but before I can actually formulate the thought completely in my head, he goes, "Oh, the JCC, I love the JCC. I used to play basketball at the JCC. Does Coach Berman still work there?" And I'm like, Coach Berman just got me out of a ticket. I haven't even started my job yet. But it was this story of inclusivity in a way that, like, you can't make this stuff up in, like, the best possible way. And I've been using it for the whole 5 months I've been there. So
Beautiful. Amazing. Thank you. All right. Okay, we've got another example. Fantastic. Hey, Todd.
Tara just heard this because I told this to our past presidents. Todd, Dallas. We get data to death by our board members. How many members do you have? What's your CapEx this year? What have you raised? All those things. And I think they lose sight. And, we've really been leaning into community. So we serve about 400 seniors a week in sit-down lunch in our center. And they come in, and Tara knows they occupy the whole lobby. It's theirs.
Yeah.
I'll help you if you try to move them along. But there's two, Don and Joanne Epstein. Don is 96, Joanne is 93. Just celebrated their 73rd wedding anniversary. They look like Lego figures. They're both like this tall. They are, am I wrong? And they move at their own pace.
It's an amazing detail.
So it's Don's 96th birthday, and he shows up for lunch. And I said, "Don, what are you doing here?" His kids live in Dallas. And he says, "I'm here with my community. That's where I want to celebrate my birthday." And by the way, Don never eats lunch because we serve too much food. But this is where he wanted to be.
Yeah.
And when I spoke to our past presidents, I told them that story because they ask all those other questions. And we have to remind them, we make this community happen. Like Don shows up here for his 96th birthday. That's what we do. We raise money. We do all the adult things that we know we have to do. But if we didn't do those things, where else is Don going? And that's what we do. And that's the why.
Beautiful. Thank you. Gorgeous. Amazing. Did anyone walk away with a version of a core message, kind of a key takeaway that you want to remember and repeat? Thoughts on a moral of the story? Yeah.
I would say the phrase that we use in everything we do is profound Jewish connection for every generation. And that is the lens through which we now do everything. And it's not, and profound, like, it just means that you're not just like looking at somebody and passing and being like, hey, it's like you look at somebody, you see them. And for non-Jewish people who are in our building, that might be the only connection they have with Jewish community whenever in their entire lives. But we want to be the place where it is that profound connection, and all ages, all the time. And it helps us also think about designing programs to drive connection. So
Beautiful.
that's the phrase.
Love it. Thank you so much. Okay, fantastic. All right, team. In sum, here's the thing I really want you to walk away with. Stories, as we know, help us be memorable and trustworthy and influential, especially in these big moments of challenge and change and opportunity like Mimi described. Public narrative is a framework that's designed to help you mobilize, galvanize, organize your community and move them forward and invite them in a way that helps them see where they can stand on deck, what role they can play in this story and in this journey. It turns your presentations into invitations. Challenges need to be part of the story. You need to build empathy and vulnerability, right? Choices demonstrate values and agency, and outcomes show what's possible. And we have an extra level of responsibility when we're talking about telling other people's stories. The core message, this idea, this small repeatable phrase that you want everyone to take away and remember is really the moral of the story. So as you're out there and you're putting your story gathering eyes on and you're thinking about all of these little moments, come back to what is that one moral that we're going to remember and repeat in every opportunity. Repeat it early and often. And so to close, I would love for one or two people here to share either a question that's sitting with you, something that's come up in conversation, either from the core content or from your interactions with your colleagues here, and one commitment. What are you going to commit to when it comes to telling your community story, to telling other stories, to developing that core message that's easily memorable and repeatable? A question or a commitment? Any examples? What's one question you're walking away with or one commitment you're willing to make following this conversation? Take back the package, share the ideas, think about other ways that you can help build that storytelling muscle and extend it to the rest of your team. Fantastic. One other question or commitment?
I'm committed to developing an authentic core message that delivers on a vision that I believe in.
Beautiful. Thank you. Gorgeous. Anybody else who wanted to speak that I missed? Love it. Committed to finding and sharing more of these great stories internally and externally. Friends, I got into this work because I grew up in a town that didn't have Jewish infrastructure and fell in love with the wit and wisdom and warmth of Jewish tradition, and realized very early on that in order to make it happen, somebody has to step up to the front of the room and make it happen. And that's how community moves forward. And it is such a profound joy, and it's been such a wonderful experience to be able to do this storytelling session with you. I can't wait to hear the stories you tell. Thank you so much.